Yeah, we're here in Judy's exhibition at the Serpentine North, and I'm so excited that we can have this conversation with Judy and Nadya today. And it's a conversation about what if women ruled the world. It's a collaboration between the two of you. And before we actually go into this project and talk about also how everyone can participate in it, I wanted to kind of begin with the beginning. And I wanted to ask you both how you actually met, because I hear a rumor that it somehow went through books. And you, of course, both in your artistic practice have also a practice as writers, which I think is one of the things which brings you together. And I hear that actually, Judy, you read Nadya's book, but it would be great to hear from both of you how you met for the first time and also how you became aware of each other.
It was quite a coincidence. I had already read Nadya's book, Read and Riot, and I filled it with Post-its because I was completely struck by how she said things that could have come out of my mouth. I didn't know her. Of course, I knew about Pussy Riot, and I knew about these young people who had confronted and made this huge scene internationally because they had confronted Putin and his distorted power. And I had what I thought was going to be a one-time Zoom call with Carola Jane and Dementi. And I don't even remember how Carola happened to bring up the fact that Nadya was going to be in New York when I was going to be in New York. Maybe you were already talking to them about doing something?
Well, we were in touch, but they mentioned that they know you, and I said, oh my God, can you please make it happen? I really want to meet Judy.
And so then Carola had a luncheon. Through them, we had already started thinking about doing something together. And I brought photos of the banners from What If Women Ruled the World. And at the luncheon, quite spontaneously, Nadya and I started reading the questions and answering them back and forth. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And that was how the project was born. You have to do this together. And then Dior sponsored it. That was like, we were trying to figure out, it was like the fall, September of 2022. And then Dementi, Nadya, and John came to Berlin and they filmed, and we premiered the film at Miami Basel in December at Miami ICA. And like a lot of my projects, I found myself running after it, going like, wait for me. But in the meantime, Nadya and I had really bonded.
Thank you. No, it's beautiful. And I wondered, Nadya, if you can talk a little bit about, from your perspective, how we first also encountered the work of Judy, because you say that Judy is one of your mentors also, like Marina Abramovic. And when you were asked what prompted it, and you say that, or what you learned also from Judy, you said it's long-termism and also persistence. And I think that's so important because, as Roman Kajarnik says in How to Be a Good Ancestor, in his book, The Philosopher, he says we live in a world of short-termism and we need to kind of go from there into long-termism. So it would be great to hear from you about the importance of Judy's work for you, and then also from your perspective about this first meeting.
I encountered Judy's work when I was looking for feminist role models. And I first came into the world of arts, learning about it through male figures, as a lot of us did. It's just the nature of our education. And then I realized that I'm missing a little detail, which is called penis, and I'm not really fitting into the male art world. So I started to learn into feminist art figures. And Judy became one of the godmothers of my arts. And when I got a chance to meet her, I screamed as loud as I can, Carola, I need to meet Judy. And she told me, well, Judy's very busy. I said, well, we have to make it happen. It's just that absolutely have to happen. So then the lunch. Judy came with my book that was written all over, and it touched me because I would never think that Judy would read my book. It's just very humbling, and it's just such a great honor. And so I encountered wonderful Judy's questions. What if women ruled the world? And 10 subsequent questions. Would buildings resemble homes? Would men and women be equal? And they touched me very deeply. And as any great work of art, they really changed your perspective on life pretty much forever. So now when me and John travel the world, we see the building and we just think, oh, what if this building actually did look like a womb? And I think this collaboration is extremely meaningful to me because I love to build movements and I love to build participatory projects.
With Chris Bailey, the curator, who is here, we discussed a lot collaboration, and Chris, who co-curated the show, always emphasized the importance of collaboration in your practice. And that's true for both of you. Practice is deeply collaborative in nature. If you think, Judy, about, Women's House, which you initiated with Miriam Shapiro. If you think also about the Birth Project, which is central in this exhibition, is a very collaborative work, the dinner party, of course. And Nadya also, Pussy Riot is a collective community which involves many different people. It's a movement. So I wanted to ask you about collaboration and the importance of collaboration for your practice, but also for the 21st century.
When we came up with the idea of Pussy Riot, it was just two of us, my friend Kat and I, but we always wanted to build a movement. And it was our dream, and we joked about it. We didn't really think that's going to be real because it was just very goofy in the beginning. We didn't have any money. We had to steal beanies to make balaclavas. And then my friend Kat had a cat, and the cat really loved peeing on our balaclavas, so it also stinked. And it was not attractive at all. We didn't have anything to offer people in terms of money or fame, just the opportunity to get arrested with us. And even though that was all very true, we were able to build this movement. I think with any collaborative project, it's very important to have this initial vision. And the vision for this project was provided by Judy's work, What If Women Ruled the World, and Judy's questions. But then once you have this idea and this vision, it's very important in my mind to open the project up to the world, to destroy the fourth wall. I really love the idea of Brecht about destroying the fourth wall. Not a big fan of stages that separate the artist from the audience. And as Judy says a lot, just let the project be and let it have its own life.
Well, what I love about Pussy Riot, number one, is that anybody can be part of Pussy Riot, right?
In the beginning, it was just women, but then we kind of
included men, right, which I love too. The other thing I really admire about Pussy Riot is that everybody who participates in it understands that activism requires courage and can have consequences, because unless you are willing to do what Pussy Riot has done, which is pay the consequences, what you have done and survived, that's one of the reasons Pussy Riot has been so successful and important, and why I say we need Pussy Riot in America.
Well, you have it.
Now we have you.
We have you too. Once you participate in one Pussy Riot action, you become a member. So now Judy Chicago is also a Pussy Riot member.
And we're obviously sitting here in front of your participatory quilt, What If Women Ruled the World? And maybe it's the moment also to talk a little bit about how this project, happened, how also the questions, began, and how you then decided to collaborate on it, because it's an ongoing collaborative project. It's a long-term project. It's not going to end here in London. It's only just begun. It's a project which will evolve over many years, and it's about congregation. It's about coming together, both physically but also virtually.
Well, I think one of the things is important, and Nadya and I talked about this very early on. Neither of us is interested in establishing matriarchy, even though the questions could suggest that. What both of us are interested in is equity and justice on the planet. But in order for that to happen, women in the world have to be brought into the world at a level we are not, right? And in order for that to happen, people have to think about questions around equality and what it would mean if women were part of our concept of God, if women had power. And so I think Dementi gets a lot of credit in terms of what they've done with the project. Dementi was into NFTs, and this project is completely different from minting NFTs. They have discovered that their original purpose, which was cultural change, has been happening because of this project, because people all over the world have been asking them to set up booths, which was John's idea, a video booth, where people could answer the questions themselves, think about the questions. And at this point, I think they've done that in 10 countries now, right?
All over.
All over. And so for them, it's been a real journey of discovery, and it's shifted their perspective from using Web3 to mine money to using it to mine meaning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I loved your take from the very first day we've met. You said, I'm not really interested in the money aspect of it, but I want to build a movement. And I said, well, it's the right collaboration, because this is all I am about.
I know.
Can you tell us how actually everyone can participate very concretely? I think it would be great for everybody who's watching, the film we're doing here today to know how they can enter the project and become part of it.
First of all, it's a digital project. So is it your first digital quilt? So it's a new thing for Judy's practice. It's a digital quilt. Like Judy's entire practice, she's been doing physical quilts and a lot of participatory projects. So it's the very first one that's digital. And the one that you see behind us is a replica. So it's evolving, and it's going to be different, and it's going to be exhibited in a different place. And it exists primarily in the digital space. And the reason behind it, because both of us and everyone involved in this project really wanted to make it accessible. You don't have to be in London. You don't have to be able to come to Serpentine or to the new museum or to the physical booth. You can just record your answer with your phone. So as long as you have access to internet, you have access to this project. And it was important for us that people of all backgrounds, who speak any language, can participate in this project. It's very simple. You go to the website, whatifwomenruledtheworld.com, and then you can participate with your answer. And you don't have to think twice about it, because if you ask me, this is a unique opportunity to collaborate with one and only Judy Chicago.
It's also an invitation to people to think about some of the questions that this project raises, and it grew out of my collaboration with Dior, and Dior has continued to support it. And I think it's really important that the other night at the opening, I spoke about what I've learned from working with Dior and the fact that Dior has brought my work and our work to a worldwide audience. And they have that level of global reach. And the thing that I didn't anticipate, I'm not sure anybody did, was when Dementi first posted this and started going around the world and setting up video booths and inviting people to participate, we thought we would get mostly text-based answers, right? Mm-hmm. And people started sending art as well. And so you can go and actually listen to people answering the questions. But what it is an invitation to do is to think together around the world about how the world could be different. Would old women be revered if women ruled the world? Would women and men be equal? Would there be private property? Most important, would the earth be protected? And as Nadya said, we're not interested in matriarchy. We're interested in people coming together and thinking together about how to make the world a different place. After all, we created this world, and we can recreate this world.
Yeah, one of my favorite statements of yours regarding this project was that you really wanted to make it accessible not just to women, but to people of all genders. Because I think someone suggested that maybe just women should be able to participate.
Absolutely not.
And said no.
And also all generations. I think one of the things, I mean, your dialogue is a transgenerational dialogue, but also this project seems to me a deeply, transgenerational project. And in a previous conversation you had, which I was listening to, you actually talked a lot about this relationship, between different generations, and you talk about mentorship. Judy, you talk about Anais Lynn being your mentor, and the extraordinary story when you went to this school in a house, this Buckminster Fuller, and Lawrence Durrell, and and Anais Lynn, and Nadya, you talk, of course, about the situation of being mentored by artists like Marina and Judy. So yeah, the sort of the transgenerational aspect and the mentorship aspect I wanted to ask you about, because it seems important.
Well, it's not just transgenerational. I mean, it's also, I'm reading Nadya's book, reading Riot, and before I met her, and it's speaking to me across generation, across culture, across country, across geography, and across language. And, that is something that is very difficult to achieve. We're so bound by where we are physically, where we are, privileged Westerners, for example. And also the issue about only women participating, that will not work. We cannot change the world without men. We have to do it in partnership, right?
I agree. I remember our interaction with you about Hypatia. So the Brooklyn Museum approached me to record a little audio piece about one figure from your dinner party, and I picked Hypatia because I was sentenced to jail for 2 years, partly because of Hypatia. And it sounds absolutely insane, but that's the reality of living in patriarchal system, and in particular in Russian government. So one of the reasons why I was sentenced to 2 years in jail because the police found notes in my laptop that they took away from me about her, and she was tortured and tortured to death because she was a woman philosopher and mathematician and an educator, and Christian fanatics did not love that fact, so they decided to murder her, and that was the proof for the Russian government that yes, I'm a feminist, and feminist is an anti-government, anti-Christian ideology, and it was a proof that I'm standing against religion, and I have hatred against religion, and I want to destroy Russia and its traditional values, and so therefore I have to be locked up to jail for 2 years.
I think it's important to tell people who Hypatia was. Hypatia was a philosopher and mathematician in Rome who believed also in goddess worship, believed that some of the breakdown of Roman society was a result of the highly patriarchal nature of Roman society. And she preached a reverence for goddesses at a time when Christianity was beginning to create the dominant culture. And she ran the School of Alexandria. And she was, Nadya mentioned tortured. She was actually pulled from her carriage by a group of fanatic monks and torn limb from limb. And she is one of the figures on the dinner party. So I remember, I think it was at our first dinner that you talked about knowing who Hypatia was, which was number one, amazing, because most people don't know who Hypatia was.
It's important.
And two, that you had been so influenced by her writings and who she was. I thought that was just completely amazing, because it also meant that you had reached back into history to find predecessors for your opposition, my opposition to the culture, and had looked for ways to think against the culture. I think that's something people don't understand, how challenging it is to think against the culture.
Very. And so in that way, it's transgenerational, not just our generations, but we're reaching 2,000 years back.
In a very long durational way, yeah. Mm-hmm. Now it's interesting also, because another thing which brings you together, and you both spoke about this, is of course the patriarchal kind of destruction of nature and of Earth, and you both created projects for Earth. Judy, you created with Jane Fonda and Swoon here at the Serpentine, and with Greenpeace and different other organizations create art for Earth. And Nadya, you created a project called We Need a New Earth. And that's actually the next question I wanted to ask you, because I think it's important to cover that here in the conversation, because many of your works, for both of you, underscore the belief that the liberation of women is deeply connected to the equitable treatment of all living things and the restoration of Earth.
We Need a New Earth was, of course, an ironic name because you cannot create a new Earth. But it was a project that we did back in 2017 when I already started to get followed by the police almost to death. So no matter what I do, I would get arrested. I would get out of the house, so I'd get arrested. So I did something that what Soviet dissidents do back in the day, get out to the nature, a few hours away from Moscow, where I'm not as much followed by the police. They didn't really care at the time what I was doing in the forest. So I came to the forest with this Russian wintry forest in January, very cold, and a giant banner in lettering, white on red and Soviet-style letters. And the banner said, "We need a new Earth." And it was an homage to Moscow conceptualist group, one of my godfathers and godmothers. Monastirsky, yeah. Коллективные действия, collective actions. They did that because they could not safely do their art in the city. They had to go outside, otherwise they would be brought to mental institutions and prisons. And the reason why I care about nature initially, because I'm from the city on the very, very north of Russia, of Siberia. It is extremely polluted to the point of earth being raped to extract materials. And this ugly picture really made me an activist really early on. I was 7 or 8, and I remember seeing the black snow and understanding that's not how it should be, right? The snow is supposed to be white. And then I started to dig into it, and I started to go to local library and learn about the pollution. And fast forward, it brought me to making a series of ecological projects.
So you came to activism through environmentalism?
Environmentalism, and then around the same time, feminism, because I do, as Judy, believe that those are closely intertwined.
You know, that's very interesting because my husband, photographer Donald Woodman, and I live in New Mexico, which is the center of the nuclear industry in America. In the mountains, when you fly into Albuquerque, people don't realize that inside those mountains is housed the country's nuclear storage facility. And we did a project called Nuclear Wasted because we were working on the Holocaust project, and I was reading Robert Lifton, and he was looking at Holocaust, nuclear Holocaust, and the mindset of the Nazi doctors who went home from the concentration camps, kissed their wives, played with their kids, and nuclear scientists and how they distance themselves of the consequences of the nuclear trajectory they were plotting. And in New Mexico, there are a lot of still piles of nuclear tailings. There are the downwinders who suffered from the tests, and there is the WIP repository, which Donald and I visited. And I also had this reaction to the earth, which is viewed as an inert object into which we are allowed to insert the most destructive material ever known to the human race, as if the earth is not going to be hurt by it, damaged by it, and I'm like you. From my earliest days as an artist, I came up with land art, you know, these guys bulldozing the earth and everybody praising it, and my feeling horrified by it and wanting to make something different. There's a room at the Serpentine. It's the first kind of retrospective of my, what is now recognized as land art, my smoke pieces, which are all about loving the landscape and merging color with wind and light and asking people to stand there and look at the beauty of the landscape. Also, disappearing all those horrible man-made structures that, yes, okay, so. Yeah, so, I mean, in this place too, we, across country, culture, geography, generation, have very similar feelings.
And that's a connection also I wanted to actually ask you about, because obviously there is a retrospective for the first time, a bringing together of all your smoke pieces here in the Serpentine North Gallery. You're on your way to Arles, where on the 29th of June, you inaugurate an exhibition at Luma Arles, where you're going to realize a new smoke piece, actually the biggest piece so far, which will be in dialogue with the architecture, as far as I hear, also of Frank Gehry. So I wanted to ask you both about rituals, because I think both of your work, there is a presence of rituals, and Tarkovsky, the filmmaker, actually the Russian filmmaker Tarkovsky, said a long time ago, I think in the 70s, that we live more and more in a society which is bereft of rituals, that we kind of need to reintroduce rituals, and that can be one of the role of art. And Byung-Chul Han, more recently, the Korean philosopher, actually wrote a whole book on the fact that we live in an age of communication where rituals risk to go missing. Now, of course, we can say that the smoke sculptures are, in a way, rituals. They very much, in that sense, evoke rituals. But Nadya, also in your work, thinking about the desert, where you work with fire, that's also rituals. And you were actually in an interview talking about also these rituals as a magical act, as a magical ritual. Can you both talk about the importance of rituals in your practice and for the 21st century?
Well, you gotta believe in something. Otherwise, the reality is just so grim. And magic helps me to simply survive. I like to believe that there is a magic wand, there is a magic button that I can push and destroy Putin, protect Earth. And I think there is something deeper, besides just, having this childish naivety and, just hope for the best. I think it's also something that I call utopian thinking. Is if you live just deep down within so-called reality, practicality, and what's actually possible, then you miss out on so much stuff. And magic opens up possibilities for me. Magic opens up this utopian thinking. And I think one of the roles of artists is to open up the world to different futures. We forgot how to think about alternative futures. We gave up on radical imagination. And that's why I'm so deeply in love with Judy's questions, because they open up people's hearts. And, through participatory nature of this project, it's not just a text on the wall that you go pass by and forget about it. Judy actually provokes you to actively think about it and participate in it. And I think you should be comfortable with answering these questions, even if you do not know the perfect answers. And that's what I practice in my art. Even if I don't know the perfect answer, people tell me, well, what's going to happen when Putin is going to go up, when Putin is going to be gone? I'm like, I don't necessarily know, but I can give you 5 different visions of, for example, I want to have a museum of contemporary art in Kremlin. I want to open a Center for Reproductive Justice in the FSB building. And they'll be like, well, this is just utopian thinking. And I'll be like, yeah, that's exactly what's my business is.
It's been very interesting. Recently, there's been an interest in an actual scholarship on women, artists, and spirituality, because which I know quite a lot about. And I was very aggravated when the Hilma af Klint show was at the Guggenheim, which was a fabulous show, but I was aggravated by the critical writing. Hilma af Klint and these 4 women artists participated in this spiritual activity, and they didn't really paint their paintings. They were just vehicles for these ideas to come through them. And I'm like, really? Number one, women in spirituality goes back to the Middle Ages, right? Like, how about Teresa of Avila? Number 2, yes, or Hildegard von Bingen, right? Okay. Number 2, the idea of spirituality in art was not only interesting to women, but to people like Kandinsky, who's praised for it, and not deprived of agency by it, which is what all this writing does. And I think that it's more important to look at how women have incorporated ritual, collaborative ritual, into their work. Because, I mean, in a way, you're absolutely right. The digital quilt invites people to participate in a ritual. Go into the video booth or go on their phones and think about the questions.
It's almost like a confession booth.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it is kind of like a confession booth because people feel embarrassed to talk about their hopes, their dreams, or even admit to wanting a different kind of world, right? It's somehow seen as naive, overly idealistic, and I totally agree with you. We need a place for dreaming again. We have got to start to dream that the world can be a different place, and that involves ritual.
Well, I have a last question, which, as you know, is the only recurrent kind of question in all my artists, interviews and conversation. The question about the Unrealized project. I've asked Judy that question a couple of times before. Now, projects can be too big to be realized, too small to be realized, too time intense to be realized, too expensive to be realized, can be forgotten. It can also be censorship, the reason for a project to be unrealized. And as Doris Lessing pointed out here at the Serpentine, the late Doris Lessing, she said, self-censorship can also be a reason. A project we want to do but don't dare to do. So there can be many reasons why a project is unrealized. And what prompted me actually to ask you this question today is that I was listening to the conversation both of you had, and somebody actually from the audience asked you, Nadya, and you said that maybe 90 or 95% of your projects are unrealized. And it prompted me to ask you both today to tell us about one or two of your favorite unrealized projects.
My answer is going to be very short, so then you can answer it because you have you have more years ahead of you to realize projects than I do. But Hans Ulrich pushing me on that, the result was I went into seclusion for 5 months to work on bringing Revelations alive. And so basically between the female divine and Revelations, I feel completely satisfied that I have been able to, and grateful that I've been able to realize every project I've ever imagined. Now it's your turn.
What a great place to be. Well, let me roll up my sleeves. So, do we have another few hours? Well, the thing is, when you work as a political artist in Russia, one of the participants in your project, unwanted participants, but still ever present, is the police. All sorts of police have 10 divisions of police who are our biggest fans. They're following every footstep of Pussy Riot, all members, like hundreds of members. They have unlimited resources. One of my favorite projects that we never did, which resulted later partly in Putin's ashes that you mentioned, that we did in outside of Russia already, because I was already in exile in a geographically unknown location. But the initial idea was much bigger, much loftier. So they wanted to surround Kremlin with fires, this giant bonfire, 15 meters tall and 5 meters wide. And the idea was to make a ritual to get Putin out of power, and also make kind of like a witches' Sabbath, like some sort of dancing and ritual and singing around each one of those bonfires. And it was an absolutely crazy idea, because I think if we did realize that, we probably would go to jail for good, like for 20 years. They probably would charge us with terrorism. But in all seriousness, we were preparing for that project for 2 months, and lately I was looking back at all the documentation, like we were treating it dead seriously. So from the outside, performance art can look like just, simple thing, like, 20 minutes and done. But, it's like months and months and months of preparation. So we were learning how to build these giant bonfires. And when we came with all of that equipment to the Red Square, we simply realized that there's Riot police, there is FSB, there is just regular police ready to arrest us, and we had to abort the action, which was one of the biggest blows to me, I think, ever since. But I'm really glad we were able at least to realize it and put in the ashes later.
Thank you both so much. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Nadya, for this amazing conversation. Thank you all for watching, and please join the What If Women Ruled the World project by participating. Thanks again, Judy. Thanks again, Nadya.
Thank you.